Chapter 1821. Frustrating Lotus. Why don't you head off and deliver the axe to Ophelia in person? Tion can bring you to the spot, and I'm sure that you will enjoy the surroundings, Carl suggested. Rue wasn't certain what she meant, but Tion handed the rapier to Carl and then transformed back into a fox before jumping into Rue's arms and bringing them both to the tiny world. He seems enthusiastic, Nerissa joked. I don't think he wanted to remain in humanoid form any longer. He's been thinking all day about getting Lotus to give him a bath and a massage, and now that the weapon for Ophelia is done, he has the perfect excuse to stop working for the day. The clan leader laughed. Oh, to be young again. At least he managed to complete the request for your customer first. Carl declined to mention that now that Tion had the skill, he could use it as well. So, there was no fear of not making the deadline just because a young fox was a distractible creature. It certainly did make Carl's life easier now that he had more people to rely upon, though. And he could now give runic blacksmithing to more members of the guild, as he could distill it from regular smithing and runecrafting. In fact, it was even easier now that his own skills had advanced to ancient rune forging. The skill was incredibly powerful, and simply combining lesser skills was no longer an issue at all. In fact, Carl suspected that he could actually combine ones that he didn't know, as long as he had a good enough description of how they worked. He would have to experiment with it later, but for now he would keep the two clan leaders happy with answers to whatever else they were worried about. Rue had been taken away to the tiny world. The other two Supremes had new weapons, and there wasn't anything visibly wrong at the moment, so Carl had high hopes that he could get back to work. But the chance for him to simply relax was not going to last long. He could feel Lotus' aura destabilizing, either in joy or despair. Bringing a supreme-ranked weapon to Ophelia must have triggered something in her partner, as the little priestess was definitely going to reach immortality in the next 10 minutes. Dana smiled. I think that I know what happened. Ophelia taunted Lotus by stealing her fluff, and used the axe to buff her speed until Lotus couldn't catch her. Every hit increases agility. You don't actually have to do damage. So, if she just keeps poking Tifa with enough force that it would usually cause 1 point of damage, it counts, but the Spirit Bear Tyrant is immune to physical damage. Dana was watching the whole thing through Tion's eyes, but the little fox was laughing too hard to provide a coherent explanation, and Thor wasn't close enough to see the situation and translate. Oh, that's just devious. I would have never thought of using it that way. Is this what they call a trauma-induced advancement? I've heard that many people actually break through ranks in moments of great stress. Could this Lotus have broken through due to the trauma of losing her bonded pet? Dana laughed at clan leader Nerissa's question. Most definitely. Just not being able to touch the little bear would be enough to stress her out to the point that she would forget that she could simply call it back into its beast space. A beast master's bonded partner can't actually be stolen from them by conventional means, so the little bear likely thinks that it's all a hilarious game. Through his laughter, Tion managed to pass a message. Ophelia has both me and Tifa. So, Ophelia had stolen not just her bonded partner, but she had all the available fluffy things. And right after Lotus had been promised that she could bathe and brush Tion. Well, if it works, it works. As long as she manages to complete the breakthrough, that's one more immortal for the team. Then, we will have not only another Beast Master, but a highly capable healer to add to our team. She was a healing specialized Green Dragon Priestess before she changed classes, and she's got the Tree of Life ability. Nerissa whistled in appreciation. That was an incredibly powerful healing skill, and now she knew exactly who was advancing to immortality, as Carl had brought Lotus to the immortal world to help with healing and resurrections after the attack. The other healers would be glad to have her in the clan. Her technique was already becoming the standard for resurrections in the new Home Merchant clan if the target had lost their physical body, as it gave the immortal a fresh start, costing them time but allowing them to correct any mistakes they had made in their growth. The healers loved it. The combat instructors and skill library elder loved it. Those who died and returned as children absolutely loathed her, and the healers who so joyfully threw them back into the hell of their childhood with every fiber of their beings. The healers didn't see what was so bad. But they weren't bullied children with little talent. The healing classes were always valued. So, they didn't live through the same struggle for resources, the bullying over rankings, the intense competition. It was an entirely different experience, and one that the warriors were not eager to repeat. If Lotus had known how infamous she was among the warriors in the clan, she would have simply laughed. In her not-so-humble estimation, the warriors brought it on themselves most of the time. Besides, boys were rude and smelly to begin with. They weren't like Tion. If every male were like Tion, the world would be better. Soft and fluffy and gentle, and so bad at scheming that everyone around him saw through it before he had even finished forming his plan. In fact, he was so bad that he would even ask for help with his plots from Opal. Opal, the drama-addicted fae who only wanted the most entertaining outcome for her fictions. If anything, he should have been asking Kara or Ray. They would have at least helped him properly. Lotus was completely lost in her frustration at Ophelia running away with both the bear and the fox when the storm began to form, and she finally realized that her tribulation was starting. Now, it was only a matter of time before she was fast enough to catch Fee again. Chapter 1822. The Tower and Tribulation. As Lotus settled down to advance, Ophelia set Tion down on Tifa's back. "You two behave while I advance. I can feel the tribulation already. It's been waiting a while," she explained. Tion giggled. Ophelia was too kind. She had been waiting to advance until Lotus was ready, and she had finally found the right trigger for her. But Tion suspected that if she had just brought an unbonded fluffy thing, she could have convinced Lotus to advance, just to have an open slot. The residents of the tiny world gathered to watch the caffeinated duo advance, bringing the core group of the Darklight host up to immortal rank. Soon, the bunnies knew, the girls would start heading out into the immortal world for the sorts of opportunities and knowledge that would be needed to continue their growth. So, this might be the last chance that they had for a while to make a good impression on them and convince them to come back with the good stuff. Rue sat with Tessa and Thor off to the side of the grasslands as the advancement of the two began. This brings back memories. Did you know that those born here don't get a proper tribulation? It's a shame. I think that hitting them with divine lightning a few times would help build personality. The ones who come from the mortal worlds might get looked down upon by most of the locals, but I have to say that they definitely have the better personalities. I mean, they're mostly losers and loners. But they're not quite as insufferable as those who have never had to suffer or struggle for anything, you know?
Tessa laughed.
I think that I know what you mean. A teenage child is as powerful as a newly advanced immortal who hasn't started building their immortal spirit. But those new immortals from the mortal worlds have years of struggle and actual combat experience behind them. So, while others look down on them for being old and weak, they actually have the best base out of everyone. We were already thinking of giving the hatchlings some harder training in the trial tower so that they actually have to work for their progress. Rue followed her gaze to the trial tower that Carl had created for the residents of the tiny world to practice in. It wasn't going to be enough for very long. They were all reaching for immortality, and even though Carl had pushed the power level up, it was still a void immortal stage construct. However, when she examined it, Rue realized that she understood how the runes worked. It wouldn't actually take much to advance the tower. She would just have to overlay the existing runes for peak power and capacity with her own power, then let it settle into the tower. Then, it could generate barriers and enemies right up to early supremacy. That would be enough for even a peak immortal to test their powers inside. The dragons could train right to adulthood in the tiny world, in a tower that could recreate massive battlefields, entire forests full of enemies, or a million other scenarios that Carl's mind could envision. A trial tower was limited by the innovation of the creator, but Carl had used runecrafting with illusionary domain, randomize, and reality warp to create anything that the system thought would be an appropriate challenge for a combatant on that level of the tower. It wasn't the same fight every time like most normal people would create a trial tower to be. That sort of construct was normally left by powerful mages to determine an inheritor for their powers if they thought that they would die without a disciple worthy of them. So, the trial was set to eliminate anyone who wasn't worthy of their very specific sort of inheritance. I think that I will give that thing a little tweak while we wait. I promised the Carl that I would help the guild with my powers, now that he's given me such a wonderful crafting skill. So, I will upgrade the tower to Supreme Ranked, and your clutch of baby dragons will be able to use it like a dungeon that doesn't drop loot.
Tessa laughed.
Well, not exactly. You see, we give the ones who take the trial rewards for the levels that they clear. So, there is loot, it just doesn't come from the tower itself. Kara thought about the possibilities. With just a bit of work, they could definitely turn a new trial tower into a loot vending machine. The system might stop her from continually raiding it for shiny stuff, but they could definitely get the system to give everyone who tried it a reward on their first time through. That could wait. Once Kara had all the details of the loot dispenser worked out in her mind, she would get Rue and Carl together to make it, and it would be glorious. They could put it in the courtyard of the town and charge people to enter. If you could get more loot by beating your personal record, they could even get people to pay more than once.
What could be better than that?
All they had to do was make sure that the vast majority of contestants would get something good enough to get them to the tower, but not good enough that they wouldn't need what the store was selling. After all, what good was a loot vending machine if it cut into their other businesses? Maybe they could stock it with the items that they didn't deem worth selling? That would be better than letting it make its own, and they could set the item tier by the level that the contestant cleared. The first time a particularly powerful peak immortal got a peerless grade item from the upper levels of the tower, it would bring them from all over, dumping cash into the Darklight host for the chance at loot they could never afford on their salary as elders. People really underestimated her financial genius. Chapter 1823. Tiny Attention. The tiny world was actually beginning to feel like a tribulation all the time lately. The energy of a tribulation took weeks or months to fade from a mountain range in the real world, and the tiny world trapped the energy that was pulled into it. So now, with two advancing at once, Rue could actually taste the divine lightning in the air for the tribulations. The mortals hadn't really realized it yet, and she didn't think that the immortals had either. They could feel the lingering lightning energy in the air, but they weren't far enough along the progression that they could feel the faintest traces of divinity in the air. Except maybe that divine lightning hatchling. She seemed far too happy to not be perfectly immersed in her element. Technically, the divine lightning dragons were actually a low immortal species, and the tribulation dragons had a higher maximum potential than them, but when exposed to divine energy, they had a faster growth rate through the immortal realms. She had spent millennia studying the evolutionary pathways of dragons and the various adaptations that they had developed while she was trying to survive the first world she had landed on. She also knew an immense amount about the vulnerabilities of other species, but she had put the most work into dragons. Not just because they were the core of many enemy forces, but because studying them helped her own growth. Both in that world and this one, she was known as a brilliant strategist, and her experience was telling her that the little blue troublemaker was going to soar to the stars living here in the tiny world with its nearly perfect growth environment. She understood how the spell worked, though she didn't know it herself. But she had never seen one that was quite this well-adjusted to growth. It had to be a side effect of being made by a beastmaster and then altered when he became a pet tamer. This was definitely Carl's space, and she could feel the distinctive power of the pet sitter class. That class was not something that humans were supposed to get. A fact that was confirmed when she saw the Lesser Watchers. They were a reduced version of the divine helpers that the world dragon himself sent to oversee worlds. Normally, such a class and skill would only become available to one of the ancients, a primordial species far older than humanity, or to the world dragons themselves. Though, she couldn't guarantee that Carl was actually a human. He was using that form now, and that's what people here saw him as. But what if he had done like she had, and evolved beyond his base species? She accepted that she had been tricked by him as a child, and he wasn't a Tengu. She could sense that it was a disguise when she saw it again. But his human form didn't feel natural either. More like it was a placeholder, designed to blend imperfectly with the population. If he thought that he was actually passing as a human, he was sadly mistaken. She could see that he had been shaving daily, but his beard was already coming in by the end of the day, his eyes were void black with no sclera, and his fingernails were very clearly metallic. If anything, it looked more like a monster pretending to be human, but without the awareness that Ray or Tion had about their forms being non-human. Kara, on the other hand, seemed utterly uncaring that everyone knew she was a chaos badger. She didn't even try to hide it. To Kara, that would take all the fun out of life. If people didn't realize she was a badger, they would have no chance to prepare for life around a badger. And if they weren't given the chance to prepare, it felt more like an ambush, and ambushes were for enemies, not casual background characters in her life. Carl laughed as he watched Kara scheming to create a new trial tower during the advancement of Lotus and Ophelia. But the lightning was taking time to form this time, with the two storms seeming to have halved the growth rate of the tribulation. It might be an issue with his tiny world, so Carl increased the exposure of the tiny world on the mortal world side, and then cracked it open a bit on the immortal world side. It was still linked to their apartment in the new home compound, and nobody would break in there, so he felt safe enough as he let energy flow in from both sides. That helped a little. The three Supremes noticed immediately that there was a separate space, mixing the energies of two different worlds to support a tribulation, and the clan leader turned to Carl for an explanation. I think that perhaps it's time we took a little tour of your tiny world, isn't it? That place clearly isn't a normal separate space. Carl laughed. The more, the merrier. Besides, it's only right that you get to see all the mortals I've tucked away until they advance. I will be asking to induct some of them into the clan sooner or later. Especially these two, and the Red Dragon Priestess who advanced recently. They often travel together with me and Dana, so they will want to go on adventures in the immortal world. However, there are a bunch of lizard folk and demons who are more comfortable staying hidden as they form their immortal spirits. Now, I'm truly curious. It's like you've got a whole hidden clan, just waiting for the right moment to enter the world. When she put it that way, Carl couldn't deny that she had a point. With the freed slaves, he really did have an actual clan of immortals going at this point, but they lacked all the basics that immortals would normally get from a clan because they were utterly terrified of the outside world. Chapter 1824. Fist Fight the Tribulation. Carl placed a lesser watcher in the shop to assist the Dark Elves in dealing with customers. They had access to his inventory and beast spaces, so they could collect the items that were designated for sale, even if they weren't in the store's inventory. Then, he opened a portal to take the two Supremes to the tiny world. The pack leader took a deep breath and then sighed. You really have done a wonderful job of this place. I must say, there aren't many places in the immortal world that would lose to it from a pure energy quality standpoint. But how do you stabilize it? Carl gestured into the distance, where the fields could be seen on the far side of the lake. Magical resources. There are hundreds of millions of mythic and immortal-grade magical plants growing in here, and they not only generate but refine energy as they grow. The balance of elements, the quality of the exuded energy, it's all based on the fact that this place is essentially a giant cultivation farm for alchemy resources and food products suited to immortal beastkin. The pack leader looked left, to where a bunny held a half-eaten white radish in both hands, snacking on the immortal-grade resource as she waited for the show to begin. The bunny froze as she felt the Leekin's attention, then took a subtle step away as he looked away. I get it now. And now I know where all the bunnies went. You said that you rescued them, but I didn't see any surplus of them in the clan. So, you have brought them all here to what? Just be bunnies. They help with the farming, the cooking, and the trade goods creation. You see, we've given them trade skills. Most are specialized in gardening and cooking-type life skills, but we have some alchemists and other skills as well. We even helped some evolve into Bloodstrike jackalopes so that they could protect their dens. Nerissa immediately spotted the ones that he meant, as they were wearing armor and weapons, and had antlers that looked like they belonged on an antelope, not a rabbit. They looked quite comfortable in armor, which was just confusing, but the lightning was beginning to charge, and none of them wanted to miss any part of this tribulation. With the mixed energies of two worlds, plus the unique energy signature that was the tiny world, and already brimming with tribulation energy, it was bound to be spectacular. Ophelia sat cross-legged and let Tifa return to Lotus, while Tion hopped up on Dana's shoulder to watch the show without getting in the way. He was already immortal, he didn't need to get hit with lightning. It would make his fur stand on end. The first strikes landed on both ladies at the same time, and Tion frowned as he realized his fears were justified. Even from this distance, his fur was all crackly with static. If he had been any closer, it would be a nightmare to fix. He couldn't even brush it back down because the static would shock him. Lotus was going to have to fix this later, since it was her fault anyhow. Dana used Eternal Lightning as a barrier to protect her body as she petted the irate little fox. The lightning barrier absorbed most of the static, but every strike was adding more. She had to do something to avoid laughing. Lotus had Tifa held securely in her arms, and the little bear was suffering the same fate as Tion, but from point-blank range. It was only immune to physical damage, not divine lightning. For the first 2 strikes, Lotus' barrier had held, but when the third one hit, the bear got a shock, and it was not impressed with this situation. However, Tifa wasn't willing to let Lotus suffer this alone, so she stayed in Lotus' arms instead of retreating to her space. At least until Thor warned her. If you keep absorbing the lightning from the tribulation, it's going to mess up her advancement. I will give her a stuffed toy to cuddle instead. Reluctantly, Tifa retreated to her space to pour energy into her beast master, helping her along with the advancement process. The beast's space was already at immortal rank, and Tifa could feel that another space was becoming available. That seemed like a good sign of advancement. So, she focused on adding energy to the new space, letting it finish forming without taking energy away from the tribulation that was remaking Lotus' body. The priestess had changed into her Tree of Life form now, regenerating branches as fast as the 4th volley of lightning was tearing them away, her branches exploding with the power of the strikes. In the distance, Ophelia had a much more berserker-type reaction to tribulation. She was trying to fist-fight the lightning. With her shiny new axe equipped, she had transformed into giant bear form, and she was on her hind legs, swatting at the incoming lightning and roaring in frustration. Pack leader Blackwood chuckled as he watched the bear trying to get revenge on Tribulation Lightning, while clan leader Nerissa just sighed and rolled her eyes. A berserker was a berserker when you came right down to it. Deal enough damage to them, and they simply went feral. Still, she thought that the Titanic Bear Totem Berserker had a chance of winning this round. Whatever skill she had used last had actually stopped the tribulation for a split second, and the energy had lost cohesion before soaking into her body. That was new. As the leader of a clan who took in newly advanced mortals, she had seen thousands of these scenes, and that was the first time that she had seen someone stop a tribulation lightning strike with pure brute force. Sure, plenty of classes could stop it with a barrier, but stopping it with an attack skill was an entirely different matter. Chapter 1825. Now she can explore. The tribulation storms began to fade after the 5th strike, but both Lotus and Ophelia took a 6 before they completely faded, and the pair advanced to immortality. Sensing that the advancement was done, and the danger was over, Tifa returned from her space to land in Lotus' arms, only to nearly have her spot stolen by Tenna, who was naturally attracted to the lingering divine lightning from the tribulation. The bear and the divine lightning dragon stared each other down for a second. Then Lotus wrapped her arms around Tifa and her legs around Tenna, as they were too large to hug at the same time with just arms. I win. I'm immortal, and now I have my fluff back. Fee can't run away from me anymore. Tifa laughed and turned her dainty mistress head to the left, showing her a faintly smoking giant bear, who was clearly also an immortal. You're still not ahead. But it's her new weapon that made her so much faster. You should ask the new dragon to make you a healing stick. If it heals as good as Fee's axe zooms, you won't have to do anything at all after the first heal. Lotus didn't quite follow, as she hadn't seen the weapon when it was in the open. But if there was good stuff and new dragons, she was in. Rue came over and patted Lotus on the head. Good work, little priestess. Now you're an immortal beast master, and you can pick a second beast. I can sense the second space within you. Lotus searched her mind and found the empty spot. There is. Oh, that is wonderful. And I have the perfect idea. I will just keep this one. You don't mind, do you, Tenna? We can fly around together and play in the lake and do cannonballs with Tifa and eat breakfast burritos.
Tenna laughed.
Staying with Lotus didn't seem too bad. If there was one thing that everyone agreed about, it was that Lotus was way more relaxed about rules than the orphanage staff. It would be a shame to be away from her best friend, but Ewan would understand. After all, the entire escaping routine was his idea, and the little black dragon loved to explore. He wouldn't be too mad if she found a better way to explore, even if it was exclusive. Agreed. Carl sensed divine attention for 3 long seconds, and then the oppressive sense of power faded. Ha, joke's on them. It wasn't me who got the baby dragon. Carl whispered to Dana, who was laughing so hard that there were tears running down her face. Yuan landed in Naksha's arms. You need to be an immortal soon. She's going to be exploring without me. And you think that I will take you exploring? Yuan frowned. Her job was to make sure he didn't get into more trouble and to teach him how to black dragon. It might actually be a challenge to get her to take him places. I need to learn all the black dragon things, and they're not all here in the tiny world. So, we have to go outside, right? He tried. We will see. Eventually, you'll have to go out and see the cruelty of the world, but first, we will show it to you and wait for you to grow up, so you're ready to face it. But Tenna gets to play outside.
Now.
Naksha chuckled and stroked the little dragon's head. I know that you're frustrated, but everyone else is still stuck in here as well. Give it some time, and when I've advanced, I will give you the chance to go explore further. I just need a bit more time, since dragons grow more slowly than humans. You're not lying? I've already comprehended the fundamental rule of death. I'm just waiting for my body to reach the right level of growth. All things in time. And in time, all things. I know. Yuan replied, finishing the death god's adage. The servants of the death god were supposed to be patient. That was a fundamental aspect of death. But what if he wanted to know about more things than death? Didn't he have time while he waited to do all those things? Naksha chuckled as she calmed the little dragon. Yuan didn't actually have too much to worry about, in her estimation. Lotus wasn't going to give up on being surrounded by bunnies and baby dragons, so she would come back here as often as possible. In fact, she might not even take her own room in the immortal worlds. She would just borrow the link between the tiny world and the clan compound that led to Carl's rooms and use that when she was meeting new people. There was no need for her to have a whole separate dorm. Of course, that was not how clan leader Nerissa felt about the situation. All new members needed to be assigned rooms in the new member section, or people would start thinking that either the member was unwanted or they were getting special treatment and staying somewhere else. Her status as a member of the Darklight host would explain some things, but it was still important that Lotus and Ophelia made an effort to show that they were part of the clan if they wanted the title. Clan members might be rivals in nearly every way, but appearances mattered, especially during an intake event. It would still be going on for over a week, and this would actually be the perfect time to bring in the pair so that they would settle in with the rest of the young immortals that were looking for clans. Neither of them was more than their mid-20s, by the clan leader's estimation. Still practically children by immortal standards, barely grown. But she would be looking forward to the hazing ritual when someone challenged one of them. The berserker could obviously handle herself, but someone trying to damage a healing tree with a spirit bear tyrant and a hatchling divine lightning dragon on her side would be highly entertaining. Chapter 1826. Good Healing. After giving the pair a few minutes to celebrate their advancement, the 3 Supremes brought the attention back to matters of clan membership. Welcome to Immortality, Lotus, Ophelia. I am clan leader Nerissa of the New Home Merchant clan, and I would like to invite you to join our clan, in addition to your position in the Darklight host. Lotus and Ophelia both turned to Carl, who shrugged. I don't see a reason not to. The new home is good to us, and we have agreements to share resources. Plus, Lotus is already popular among the healers. Nerissa chuckled, while pack leader Blackwood nodded. Ophelia patted Lotus on the head, then fed Tenna a small piece of meat. We will accept. The New Home Merchant clan is good to their people, and they've been good to the Darklight host members. You're even pretty good to your bunnies. They come to visit us sometimes when they're off shift. Nerissa blinked slowly. She had not known that. The bunnies from our compound come to visit you here, in the tiny world? How do they even get in? Through the apartment door, obviously. They knock, we let them in. Lotus announced proudly. Right, I didn't think that one through. Of course, The Green Dragon Cleric would let the bunnies come visit their hidden pocket dimension full of ridiculously expensive magical plants. Though, as she recalled, the Alchemy Hall Master had been here more than one time before. That was how she knew the basics of its existence, but she hadn't realized that the space was quite this advanced. She suspected that Elder Socrate hadn't noticed either because he was so focused on the alchemy reagents. Once that man was directed toward his passion, everything else around him tended to fade. And lately, he had been spending nearly every waking minute with the Naga matriarch who was bonded to Carl. The one named Remy had spent more time with the elder than she had with Carl since they reached immortality. Well, if you would like to come with us, we have an intake event happening, so there are lots of other new and unaligned immortals gathered in the city. It's like a festival with visitors and all sorts of other good stuff to find. Perhaps you'll even find a new favorite recipe. Lotus nodded happily and then took out her notepad. Immortal recipes, here I come. Fee, grab my dragon. We're going exploring. The pack leader laughed, while Nerissa did her best to remain serious. Pack leader Blackwood put a hand on top of Lotus' head, stopping her before she could run for the exit. There is one more thing before we go. The healers have taken to using your technique to deal with soul damage and damage to the immortal spirit. The one that reverts the body back to childhood so that it can regenerate naturally. There are a few in the clan who hold a grudge. Lotus shrugged. What are they even going to do about it? They're children. I'll just have Tifa lick them to death. As much as Nerissa wanted to deny it, that might actually work. Once the warriors were being attacked by the spirit bear, they would likely be restricted to just using attacks like Cleave and Rend, which were both physical damage skills. And that would just tickle Tifa. Nerissa would pay good money to see that. In fact, she might just tip off a few of the elders that the little priestess had advanced, without warning them that she had become a beast master. For the extra entertainment value. You may wish to keep that fancy new weapon that Lady Rue made for you hidden, Miss Ophelia. It will attract undue attention and envy within the clan. Not many get that sort of treatment, and even fewer survive having others learn about it, she added. Ophelia nodded. I will keep it under wraps when I'm in the outside world. I've already traded for an epic-grade immortal axe set, hand axes. Those should be more than enough for most situations, and then I can change when I'm in an emergency. Wonderful. It's good to see someone who understands basic prudence. So many are eager to show off their power and flex on those weaker than them, while forgetting that they're also becoming targets for those stronger than them. Ophelia nodded. It pays to be stealthy sometimes. Now, if I was as cute as my little flower here, it would be perfect. Nobody would expect it when I turned into a giant bear. Ophelia laughed, and Nerissa smiled, while Rue winked at Lotus. She actually had a disguise spell that could do that, but a werbear usually had a fully human-looking form as well, so Ophelia probably had the option to look non-threatening if she wanted to. She was quite striking as a werbear, so her human appearance was most likely athletic and attractive, unless there were hidden flaws or scars somewhere hidden by the fur. But Rue didn't think so. Normally scars on a werbear left the fur silvered when it grew back in, so even though they didn't really age as immortals, they would eventually begin to look like older bears. There were no signs of that on Ophelia, so either she was very young or she had exceptional healing from the start, so she never collected any scars as a mortal. That would likely change as an immortal. There were many more attacks that left permanent marks, even though everyone used potions and skills to hide them. Nearly everyone. The Lycans and werbears usually wore their scars with pride, showing off their combat prowess and experience. In their culture, Ophelia was practically a soft-handed schoolgirl who had never seen struggle. But she would find that out soon enough. Somewhere around the time that the older bears who were into younger women started to hit on her and show off their battle scars. Having these two around for the intake event was nearly guaranteed to be a fun time. Chapter 1827. A trip to the clan. Why don't we all take a trip to the clan so that you can get acquainted with the layout and start meeting people? The others will accept you freely as new recruits, and you don't have to tell them that you came from a mortal world if you don't want to. There is still some bias against mortal-born humans, but it's mostly from outside the clan. I will get you both an apartment next to Carl's so that you don't have to go far to get back to the tiny world, and I'm assuming that you both want to stay together? Lotus nodded happily. Yep, I don't sleep well without my cuddle bear. The clan leader chuckled. Anyone else would be considering the ramifications of sleeping next to a furry furnace, but for Lotus, it was just the perfect temperature, even when she had a bear on both sides of her. We can exit through the apartment. There is a dedicated entrance in the house over there. Tessa and Thor can likely join us as well. We haven't introduced them to the clan, so we might as well do it all at the same time. They definitely won't be staying in the compound much, though. Tessa still has a clutch here in the tiny world. Nerissa considered that. We can introduce them quietly later if it's better. I will just inform the elders that they were recruited now, but the Red Priestess had children to take care of. Everyone understands that concept. Tessa nodded. I would rather not leave them at all right now. They're getting too close to hatching. At most, half a day away. That should be more than enough time. We can just introduce you to the elders, let everyone visit a few shops, then you can check your new apartment and head back to wherever you stay here, Nerissa offered. Thor patted her on the shoulder. I can sense what happens around them in the tiny world. There won't be any hatching without you present. All right, that's settled. I want to go see that ice cream shop that Kara is always going to. Oh, and bring Leo, he knows the flavors. Where is Tion? I've got my brush. Oh, after I get to Tifa. My baby got so frazzled. Ophelia chuckled as Lotus began to get frazzled with too much happening at once, and led her toward the exit. Don't worry, everyone is going. We should grab a few others as well. Ray, would you be so kind as to grab your mage and the Wolf Lord? Those girls will want to see the shops too. The rest can come with their parents, but those two have just received their class, so they should meet the clan at the same time that we do. Ray vanished, then reappeared with two startled-looking girls. I will go watch the shop while my mage is exploring. Take good care of her for me. Then she was gone again, leaving someone else to explain. We're introducing everyone to the new home merchant clan, since Lotus and Ophelia just advanced. Carl offered. Oh, that makes sense. Hello, my name is Maish. And I am Lucille. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Is that a divine lightning dragon hatchling? I'm Tenna, it's good to meet you. I chose Lotus as my exploration partner, so we're going to the immortal world together. Lucille smiled at the hatchling, who was now flying circles over the group. Carl led the group up to the house and out of the apartment, only to find himself face to face with a massive black dragon muzzle directly outside his door. It's easier if you're in human form, Carl noted, already suspecting where this was going. You really don't listen. The massive dragon rumbled. This one was not my fault, and she's bonded to the priestess. I was just standing nearby. Dragons are not pets. Lotus stamped her foot indignantly. How dare you call my Tenna a pet? She is my daughter. My precious dragon baby, from another clutch. The massive black dragon tilted its head, trying to see Lotus, then gave up and transformed into a 2-meter-tall ebony-skinned human man in black and red layered robes. Now that Carl could see the dragon's information, it was clear that his first guess was right. This was an avatar of the Black Dragon, and his god was not happy about the situation. However, dealing with him would not be easy, as the system wasn't telling Carl what this avatar's power level was. He could see Supremes, he could see Legendary when Merrick had come to join them, but he could not see this dragon's power level. Maybe it was an item effect? Yeah, that would be much less concerning than the other options. Your daughter? The dragon asked carefully as the divine lighting dragon landed in Ophelia's arms.
Yes.
My daughter. I adopted her. That makes her mine. The dragon looked at Lotus, then at Tenna in Ophelia's arms, and Carl saw as the realization dawned on him. Lotus would not have children of her own, at least not in this partnership, unless there was heavy magical interference. So, to appease her natural balance loving goddess, she had chosen to adopt. The red dragon priestess smelled like she had been around eggs recently, so either there was a broody dragon in their home territory, or the orphanage had just received a clutch. That could explain why the green priestess had gotten baby dragon fever. Or, former priestess, as she seemed to be a beast master now. That didn't change much from the green dragon's perspective. Once you were one of her priestesses, you remained one as long as you had access to the magic she granted. So even as a beast master, she was still a green priestess. The avatar of the Black Dragon turned his attention to Carl. And you just allowed this to happen with a flimsy excuse? It was a sudden thing. They were celebrating her advancement, and the new space had just opened when the final bond was formed. I promise that it won't be an issue. Lotus is quite motherly when she needs to be. Chapter 1828. The Outside World. The Black Dragon's avatar scoffed, Ophelia chuckled, and even Lotus giggled. You definitely need a better story for him than that. Not even I bought it. Lotus stage whispered. I'm working on it. But if I tell him that you really just wanted a playmate to go splash in the lake with, I don't know how the Black Dragon will take it. The avatar smiled. That sounded much more likely for this tiny human and her divine lighting dragon companion. I will remain here for some time to monitor the situation. The god tells me that the Carl also has an open space, and there is a particularly wayward child of our lineage that remains troublesome. Now that's trust, Ophelia joked. But the three Supremes were all trying to figure out this black avatar. He felt immensely powerful and completely harmless at the same time. It was clear that his power level was being masked, but they couldn't tell if he posed a real threat to the people of the new home. If you're busy, I can just ask one of the others from my guild to come and do the job. Carl offered. There are no Black Dragon avatars in the Darklight host at the moment. We have considered elevating one, but she is not yet ready. How about another World Dragon avatar? Surely there is one, or a green avatar? The Black Dragon gave him a hard glare, silently asking him how he came to the conclusion that either of those would be acceptable substitutes. Right, you have a point. The World Dragon probably wouldn't stop me, and a green dragon avatar would end up spending all day playing with the bunnies. The Black Dragon didn't deny it. The World Dragon, like his ancient kin, believes that all things are valid pets as long as they agree to be kept. The Green Dragon's followers don't mind being kept as long as they're treated gently. Ophelia snickered, and Lotus simply shrugged at her much larger partner. It seems that our new friend has much wisdom about the way of the Green Dragon. Tell me, are there a lot of green priestesses where you come from? My dragon is curious. Your dragon? Oh, your divine partner, the divine green dragon that you are mentally linked with. Yes, I can see how she would be curious. There are indeed many green dragons on my world. Hundreds of thousands of them, in fact. The entire planet is nothing but dragons from the divine lineages. No servants, no other sentient species. Only dragons and food. How does that work? Doesn't it get boring with just dragons? And not even all the kinds of dragons. The avatar sighed, realizing that he had walked right into the never-ending questions of a curious green priestess. Later, I will answer your questions later. First, I must commune with my god about the bond you have formed. If it helps, you can tell him that she's absolutely adorable, and I was there when she hatched. I will be sure to relay your sentiment. Great, while you do that, we're all going for ice cream. You might as well follow along so you don't lose us. From down the street, Min laughed, having come out of her apartment when she sensed the presence of another green dragon follower. Seeing that this one was in the Darklight host and she worked in their town now, Min decided to come say hello. And totally not just because there was a tiny fluffy bear and a baby dragon. That delusion lasted all of 3 seconds after she joined the group, when Tenna recognized her and flew over to say hello. Miss Min, we're going for ice cream. Leo told me that they've got a really good flavor that arrived after the last time I snuck. I mean, the last time that I got to sample their sweets. Min did her best to ignore the stranger's glare, but behind his resting angry face, the avatar was already beginning to calculate whether this divine lightning dragon was flaky enough to consider family to green dragons. They technically belonged to the blue dragon lineage. But the insatiable thirst for knowledge of the blue dragons and the insatiable curiosity of the green dragons were quite similar. Letting the priestess raise this dragon might not be the sort of disaster they were concerned about. It was likely still going to be a disaster. Just not the type the gods were thinking when they sent him here. When they got close to the ice cream shop, Tenna spread her wings and raced out of Min's arms, aiming to be first into the shop. Carrying too much speed, She failed to stop in time and slid the entire length of the glass cabinet before being caught by the shopkeeper, who was incredibly used to the antics of young dragons after nearly a century of running the shop. "Well, hello, little one. Whose whelp are you? I don't recognize you." "I'm Miss Lotus' adopted daughter. We just got here. I'm told that you have a super special ice cream. My friend Leo told me." The shopkeeper laughed and waved for one of his staff to come out of the back. "This one is a friend of Leo's. Why don't you explain all the flavors? She's new to the clan." Carl came in with Leo and the others, trailed by the Black Dragon Avatar, who was still mostly distracted, discussing the situation with the other members of his group. Whether that was a guild or a church, Carl didn't know. But the Black Dragon was definitely busy. And there is the Pirate King himself. "Good morning, Leo." The girl explaining the flavors to Tenna greeted them. "Good morning. You know what one I want. But I think that Tenna will enjoy the dragonberry chocolate mixed with mint chocolate chip and graham crackers." Min considered that for a moment. Tart berries, sweet chocolate, with the cool mint and 2 different textures? Leo had quite the taste in snacks. Then, she noticed that Leo was handed a scoop of Rocky Road ice cream, not what he had ordered for Tenna. The clerk began mixing the flavors, while everyone else lined up to get their snacks. They were almost at the end of the line when Kara reached under her coat and pulled out a scaled black form.
Yuan.
"I couldn't let you miss out on the ice cream. Don't tell Naksha." The Avatar sighed.
He didn't get paid enough for this.
Chapter 1829. Watchers Scare People. Soon, they were all settled with their ice cream, and the Black Avatar silently watched the group interact, while the shop filled with customers from a dozen different sects. Most of them seemed to be trying to make friends with Carl, and he wanted to know why. "Branch leader Carl, a quick question for you. How long will that watcher be working the counter at the shop? My acolyte was too frightened to enter." "He's scaring off customers? That's not right. He should be good with them. His job is literally customer service." "Is it the form?" "It is definitely the form. I can likely give him a mask or something for the tentacles." The supreme-ranked visitor chuckled. "I don't think that it would help for anyone who has been to a world with ancients before. Those things cause generational trauma when they get ideas about improving the world."
Carl sighed. Damn it. They're so good at their jobs, though.
Even the craftsmen compliment them on their work ethic. "I thought that for sure it would be the dark elves that were scaring people." The visitor shook his head and smiled. "There is some guy named Swag, or something hitting on the priestess. I think that took some of the scary factor away." "Divine Swag God too, but spelled with symbols?" "Yeah, that's it. He's probably going to end up seriously injured, but he doesn't seem to mind. The acolyte I sent shopping told me that he had just come to the guild store after he was kicked out of a clothing shop." Carl sent a thought to Ray, who laughed. He tried to convince the clerks to model a collar for him. Just the collar. Yeah, that wasn't going to end well for him, and he had likely gone to the shop for healing potions before remembering that there were more elves to hit on. The moron wouldn't have gotten the name if he ever learned. While they were sitting and explaining the city to the new arrivals, Nyan came in carrying Jeff, the divine lightning dragon who had been regressed to child size to recover from his injuries.
"Oh.
That's where you all went. We were going to go back right away, but the bunnies at the warehouse told us that you were all here in town." "You know these people too?" the Black Avatar asked, seeing another small divine lightning dragon. "That's Nyan and Jeff. He was regressed to a smaller body to recover from damage to his immortal spirit. They both work with us, teaching the hatchlings in the orphanage the Darklight host runs." The Avatar nodded, knowing where Carl meant. The soul rebirth technique really does work wonders on early-stage immortals. I must say that I was shocked when I was informed by one of the other avatars that the members of your guild had mastered such an obscure technique. It was Lotus, actually, before she was even immortal. The Black Avatar looked impressed. "I have underestimated your skills with healing, little priestess. Congratulations on finding the path to one of the greatest healing arts." Jeff looked shocked. "Wait, it's a legitimate thing? We thought that it was just the green dragon messing with us because she likes cute things." The Avatar grinned at him. "I can't rule that out, but it really is one of the most powerful ways to regenerate soul damage. Only in true youth can you properly grow the base for an immortal spirit. If you wait too long into adulthood, you will never reach the same heights. Once upon a time, that was the reason for the bias against dragons and humans born in the mortal planes. Now, it's just elitism, even if it's still true that mortal-born dragons are often centuries or millennia behind their immortal realm peers, and that's not even to mention their divine realm peers. Jeff looked a little embarrassed. He was also centuries behind his immortal world peers at this point, as his power level had been reset when he had been temporarily killed. But that was all part of the process of healing. Apparently, there are actually sects that treat the technique like a reroll. You see, it's easier to gain skill points at the start of your life, when you are just beginning your growth. So, some will spend the time to teach many skills, kill their disciple, and reset them to childhood, so they can start their class progression over from nothing, but with a bunch of added skills. It's an excellent way to make apparent elites for competitions, if they only test bone age and not soul age as well, the Avatar explained. Carl laughed. There is always someone trying to get ahead, isn't there? Just a little bit of a cheat, knowing that they can exploit the rules and bring a disciple who would have passed the age limitations back to childhood for an important contest. And it's more humane than the so-called demonic cultivators, who sacrifice others to grant extended youth and faster growth to their disciples. Honestly, that needs to be renamed. Even the demons are embarrassed to be associated with them. Carl nodded. The demons value true strength, not borrowed or stolen strength. That comforted the Avatar a little. Carl knew the ways of the various species better than the dragon had expected. But then, nobody had warned him that the Avatar of the world dragon was neither a dragon nor a human. He didn't know what Carl was, but it was certainly neither of those. Looking more closely, he suspected that Carl had started with mixed blood, and it had simply mutated as he gained physique-altering skills and inheritances. Now, he was something that wasn't quite anything. Not like the mage beside him, who had clearly been human at one point, but had taken on much of the bloodline of the Stonefur Divine Fox. A little more, and she would likely be able to use holy magic innately, just like the actual Stonefur Divine Fox that was playing with the Spirit Bear cub. Chapter 1830. Slap Fight. Well, now that you've seen the favorite spot of the cubs and green dragons, why don't we all take a tour of the city and meet some of the other members? There is an intake tournament going on as well if you would like to enter. It's not necessary as you've already been accepted, but it will help build a positive reputation among the other clan members if you decide to show off your power a little, Nerissa suggested. The Black Dragon nodded. He didn't sense any killing intent within the city at the moment, so the tournament wouldn't be a loss for anyone, and it was unlikely to get the dragon whelp injured before he could determine whether it was proper for her to stay with the priestess. He was already getting the impression that it wouldn't be necessary to break the bond. But he had to do his due diligence and make sure that the dragon wasn't going to belong to the pet sitter by proxy. That would definitely not be allowed. The Avatar of the Black Dragon was finally beginning to understand that despite their lower power level, this branch of the Dark Light host was going to be every bit the headache that the followers of the World Dragon were always reputed to be. And they were reputed to be a nightmare to deal with. Ophelia smiled at the clan leader. You know what? An intake tournament sounds like a lot of fun. I haven't had a good brawl in a rather long time. I know that it's not strictly required, since we came in on a recommendation, but it would help get to know the members of the clan if we had a little friendly spar. The Avatar of the Black Dragon tried not to laugh. The words coming out of the werebear's mouth sounded very reasonable, but her intentions were anything but. All right, follow me, and I will bring you to the youth group. Anyone under 30, without a formed immortal spirit goes there. Nerissa agreed. Lotus cheered, and one of the warriors sitting on the other side of the ice cream shop laughed. You do know that you're likely to be part of the new members' hazing ritual as well, right? He called out. Lotus giggled. I'm not too concerned. Just wait until someone tries to fight me, for I am all that is healer. She had also inherited the innate physical element immunity from Tifa the same way that Carl had inherited so many skills from his beasts. Nerissa looked back and forth between the two. Actually, we can do both at the same time if you'd like. One in the intake challenge ring, and one in the other arena for a challenge. You can see both from the west bleachers, so we don't have to miss either battle. Lotus thought about the options. If she watched Fee fight, it would only stress her out. There was nothing she could do to help, and she wasn't allowed to heal from outside the fight, so she would have to just watch. But on the other hand, knowing that Fee was fighting while she was in a challenge would distract her. Unless she had Tenna watch the other fight so that she could give a direct mental recount the moment that Lotus fight was over. That would be acceptable enough. Tenna had a pretty good memory and she was good with stories. Plus, she could now put it right into Lotus' mind, so there was no need to watch the whole edited show from Opal.
She was still going to.
But she wouldn't have to. They all left the shop and headed for the arenas, where there were multiple teenage and pre-teen-looking immortals waiting to get a piece of Lotus. The word had spread that she had made immortality, and they were all people who had been subjected to the rebirth technique and regressed into childish bodies. Nerissa thought it was oddly appropriate. They might be hundreds of years older than she was, but at least they were picking on someone their own size. You'll have to draw lots to see who gets to challenge her, as there is no clear order of challenge. However, if someone wishes to have a ranking match with our other new member, Miss Ophelia, there is no line. One of the other berserkers laughed and raised his hand. I'll go. Ophelia laughed. Berserker on berserker combat was rarely an actual hostile challenge. It was somewhere between a hobby and stress relief. A match was just ending, and the two berserkers simply barged past the potential members and others waiting in line. Excuse me, coming through. Out of the way. Yes, you too. Coming through. Ophelia laughed as the other berserk simply lifted people out of his way, muttering polite words as he pushed through the crowd. They reached the sands, and Elder Fersham chuckled, quickly changing his introduction. It looks like we've got an Immortal Spirit level ranking match. Gustav versus Ophelia for an all-berserkers special. They took their spots, and Gustav roared before turning into a massive white tiger. Ophelia roared back as she transformed into bear form, dwarfing the tiger. And then they were on each other, skills and fur flying with the frenzy that only a pair of multi-ton berserkers could unleash. The sudden brutality shocked the crowd into silence for a few seconds, and then the whole arena erupted in cheers as they began to pick sides. Gustav was a 4-meter-tall white tiger, but Ophelia was easily 3 times his size, and much faster than her bulk suggested, even using her standard weapons, not the new one that Rue had created for her. The shock slowed the decision about who would fight against Lotus for nearly a minute, but none of the victims of the clan's healers were willing to wait for another match to start and lose their chance to challenge Lotus. Fine, we will let Orpheus go. He suffered the most. Who would have thought that, as a youth, he suffered from premature? The warrior known as Orpheus backhanded the boy beside him as a void immortal-ranked woman laughed so hard her eyes were watering. She was Orpheus' sister, and the source of the rumor about his lack of bedroom skills.